married her own stepson. Sinatra shattered his family for Ava. Elizabeth stole Debbie's husband. These are 17 stars. 17 absolute detonations that turned Hollywood love into front-page scandal. Gloria Grahame. Gloria Grahame, a femme fatale who fell for her stepson. In the dim glow of Hollywood's noir era, Gloria Grahame made a living playing women you couldn't quite trust. Sultry, calculating, dangerous, but no one expected her most scandalous role would unfold off-screen in her own living room. By the early 1950s, Grahame had carved out a reputation as one of the industry's most magnetic supporting actresses. She won an Oscar, she worked alongside Humphrey Bogart and Jimmy Stewart, and yet, behind closed doors, her personal life was spiraling toward one of the most jaw-dropping scandals in Hollywood history. It started with her second husband, director Nicholas Ray, man behind Ramble Without a Cause. They were a volatile pair, always drifting between passion and distance. But in 1950, Nicholas came home early one afternoon and allegedly found something that would haunt his legacy forever. According to reports whispered through studio hallways for years, Ray walked in on Grahame in bed with his stepson, Anthony Ray. Gloria denied it. Nick never went public, but their marriage collapsed soon after. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors became Hollywood poison. Studios looked the other way, but the damage was done. Grahame starred him. She married again, briefly, but it was what came next that cemented her legacy in the tabloids. In 1960, Gloria Grahame, 36, quietly married Anthony Ray, the same stepson she had once allegedly been caught with earlier. He was 23. They had 2 children together, and though they stayed married for over a decade, the marriage was widely viewed as a scandal the town couldn't digest. The revelation resurfaced every few years, blacklisting her from major roles. Directors grew wary, talk show hosts avoided her. Her career never recovered the way it should have. In her final years, Grahame retreated to small stages and quiet towns, avoiding the Hollywood glare she once commanded. She died in 1981 of cancer, away from the cameras, remembered more for the scandal than the talent. Gloria Grahame played dangerous women, but off-screen the danger was real. Her choices shattered reputations, ended careers, and left behind a story that still stuns. Not even the sharpest femme fatale could script a twist like this. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, a voice that couldn't stay faithful. In 1949, Frank Sinatra's voice was on every radio, smooth as silk, aching with longing, but at home, the man behind the croon was unraveling, tangled in a love story that would stain his reputation and leave hearts broken coast to coast. Frank was still married to his first wife, Nancy Barbato, the quiet girl from Hoboken who stood by him through obscurity, poverty, and war. They had 3 children together, and for a time, she believed in the dream they built. But fame does strange things to loyalty, and when Frank locked eyes with actress Ava Gardner at a swanky Hollywood party, something shifted. She wasn't just beautiful, she was intoxicating, bold, unreachable, and Frank could charm a nation couldn't help himself. Their affair began in secret, whispered about behind velvet curtains and studio gates. He sent flowers to her dressing rooms. She called him Francis in private. Paparazzo tried to catch them, but it was the emotional fallout at home that couldn't be hidden. Nancy knew, the tabloids knew, the public knew, but Frank wouldn't stop. In 1951, he made it official, divorcing Nancy and marrying Ava just days later. But what seemed like a passionate victory soon crumbled into chaos. Frank couldn't stay faithful. Ava, fiery and proud, refused to be humiliated. Their fights were legendary, their silences louder than any song. She once threw his belongings out a window. He once begged her back with tears and a loaded revolver on the bed, a moment she would recount with both pity and distance. The marriage dissolved in 1957, leaving behind a storm of broken trust and bitter regret. Sinatra's career dipped, his health suffered, the studios hesitated to back him. For a time, even the music faltered. The man who sang of romance had lost his muse and much of himself. Years later, Ava called Frank the love of her life, but she never remarried, and he rarely spoke of her again. He could fill a stadium with his voice, but when it came to love, Frank Sinatra left silence in his wake. Elizabeth Taylor, the fair that shattered a friendship and lit up the tabloids. In 1958, America's sweetheart broke every rule in the book, not for a role but for love, and in doing so, Elizabeth Taylor didn't just steal a man, she shattered one of Hollywood's most cherished friendships. At the time, Elizabeth was newly widowed. Her third husband, producer Mike Todd, had died in a tragic plane crash. The world mourned with her. She was just 26, already a screen legend and drowning in grief. Stepping in to console her was Eddie Fisher, one of the most popular crooners in America, and the husband of her best friend, Debbie Reynolds. What began as comfort turned quickly into passion. While Debbie stayed home caring for their young children, Eddie and Elizabeth grew inseparable. Dinners, phone calls, whispers behind dressing room doors. The press didn't need long to catch wind of it, neither did Debbie. The revelation was as cruel as it was cinematic. Debbie reportedly called Elizabeth's hotel, hoping for a friend's voice on the line, but it was Eddie who answered. The silence said everything. Soon after, headlines exploded. America's golden couple was no more, and Elizabeth, once adored by millions, was now labeled a home wrecker. The fallout was immediate. Eddie divorced Debbie and married Elizabeth in 1959, just months after Mike Todd's death. Fans were stunned. Studio execs panicked. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was public. Two stars ruined, one alliance lost, and a nation wondering how far fame could bend morality. And yet, Elizabeth and Eddie's union wouldn't last. Their marriage, born of grief and scandal, collapsed under its own weight. By 1964, she'd left him, this time for Richard Burton, igniting yet another legendary affair. Years later, Debbie and Elizabeth would reconcile. In a quiet act of grace, the two women found their way back to friendship, having sharing the stage in their later years. But the scars lingered, etched into gossip columns and fan memories. She was the violet-eyed goddess who could command a screen with a glance, but off-screen, Elizabeth Taylor paid dearly for love that arrived at the wrong time and with the wrong man. Jack Nicholson, devil behind the grin. In 1990, Jack Nicholson walked into his Los Angeles home with a confession on his lips and a secret that would blow his long-term relationship to pieces. For nearly 17 years, Jack had been with actress Angelica Huston. She was Hollywood royalty, daughter of legendary director John Huston and a star in her own right. Their romance was unconventional but magnetic, a mixture of red carpets, private dinners, and long stretches apart. And through it all, Angelica believed they were building something lasting until Jack told her he was expecting a child with another woman. The woman was Rebecca Broussard, a young model and actress, 12 years Angelica's junior. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. It was a revelation only that swept the rug out from under a woman who'd invested nearly 2 decades into a man who could never seem to give her permanence. The emotional fallout was instant and brutal. Angelica walked out of Jack's life that day and she never looked back. Years later, she'd admit the betrayal felt like an arrow through the heart. There were no screaming matches, no tabloids catching a dramatic exit, just the quiet devastation of a woman blindsided by someone she still loved. Jack stayed with Rebecca for a time and welcomed 2 children with her, but like many of his relationships, that too eventually dissolved. He was the eternal bachelor, charming and brilliant but incapable, it seemed, of lasting commitment. Friends would say he feared boredom more than loneliness. Others whispered he simply couldn't help himself. For Angelica, the heartbreak never quite disappeared. She would later marry sculptor Robert Grahame, a man far removed from the chaos of Hollywood. Their marriage remained steady, enduring right up until his death in 2008, a quiet conclusion to a love that had risen from the ashes of betrayal. As for Jack, he once confessed in an interview that of all his regrets, hurting Angelica was the deepest. The smile stayed, but behind it may have been the face of a man who once had everything and still let the best part slip away. In a town built on illusion, Jack Nicholson could transform into anyone, except the man loyalty required. Barbara Payton, the blonde siren whose love was always too loud. In 1951, Barbara Payton embodied Hollywood allure. Icy blonde hair, sultry, heavy-lidded eyes, and a magnetic presence that drew in both cameras and chaos. But behind her sensual image stood a woman whose off-screen life would soon eclipse any fictional drama. Her rise was meteoric, acting alongside legends like Gary Cooper and James Cagney. She seemed destined for cinematic greatness, but the swift climb was matched by an even faster descent, not due to lack of talent, but due to the choices she made. One of those choices ignited a scandal that torched her career. That same year, she found herself in a turbulent love triangle involving two actors, Frank Catone, a polished leading man from Hollywood's golden era, and Tom Neal, a volatile ex-boxer turned B-movie actor. Although engaged to Tone, she couldn't stay away from Neal. The triangle descended into madness, jealousy, threats, and eventually, violence. On September 14, 1951, Tom Neal brutally attacked Frank Catone outside Barbara's apartment, beating him unconscious. Tone suffered a broken nose, a smashed cheekbone, and a concussion. The headlines exploded. Photos of Tone's battered face circled the globe, and Barbara found herself trapped in the center of it all, instantly branded as tabloid poison. Still, she married Tone, but only for 53 days before leaving him and returning to Neal. Hollywood wasn't forgiving. The studios pulled back, scripts drying up, and Barbara Payton, once poised for fame, was left to spiral. She turned to nightclub gigs, cheap tabloid deals, and eventually to selling photos and favors just to get by. Whatever money she made vanished as quickly as it came. By her late 30s, Barbara was almost unrecognizable from the starlet once featured on glossy magazine covers. Her health faded, and so did her spirit. In 1967, at just 39 years old, she died broke, alone, and all but forgotten in a dingy Los Angeles apartment. She wasn't ruined by one man or one mistake. She was devoured by a hunger for love that always came with a price. Barbara Payton lived like a candle burning at both ends in Hollywood, always watching, turned away just in time to avoid the smoke. Marilyn Monroe, the secret she carried to her grave. On May 19, 1962, Marilyn Monroe took the stage at Madison Square Garden, dressed in a skin-tight, jewel-covered gown that glimmered like liquid light. She stood before thousands and one sitting president. She whispered, "Happy birthday, Mr. President." And in that moment, a whisper turned into a scandal that would echo through the decades. Behind the breathy tone and dazzling smile was a woman coming apart. By that point, Marilyn had endured 3 failed marriages, fought desperately to be respected as an actress, and had become entangled with powerful men who adored her on screen but seldom supported her in life. Chief among them, President John F. Kennedy and allegedly his brother Robert, though the complete truth was buried long ago. Rumors of an affair between Monroe and JFK rippled through both Hollywood and Washington. It was said that two met at a Bing Crosby-hosted party in Palm Springs. Eyewitnesses claimed it was more than flirting, and although neither Monroe nor Kennedy ever confirmed the relationship, her sultry serenade, delivered just 10 weeks before her death, sealed the speculation for millions. But the deeper tragedy wasn't the affair, it was the fallout. After the performance, Marilyn was reportedly shut out from the president's inner circle, silenced, cut off, and left adrift. Friends said she was emotionally frayed, increasingly isolated, desperate to be seen as more than a trophy for the powerful. Privately, she told those close to her that she felt tossed aside, a secret too dangerous to reveal, and too inconvenient to protect. Some believed she was preparing to go public, others feared she knew too much, and then, a few months later, she was gone, found alone in her Brentwood home after what was officially deemed a fatal combination of sleeping pills. Her death was ruled accidental, but conspiracy theories exploded, fed by her alleged connections to the Kennedys and the suspicious timing of her final days. She had been the most desired woman in America, and yet, in the end, Marilyn Monroe died as she lived, adored by millions, but abandoned by the few who mattered most. Johnny Cash, the man who walked the line and then crossed it. In 1956, Johnny Cash took the stage, dressed head to toe in black, singing his vow of loyalty before a sold-out crowd. His voice, rough-edged and sincere, carried the promise, "Because you're mine, I walk the line." But beneath that promise was a gathering storm. At home was Vivian Liberto, his first wife and the mother of his 4 daughters. She had stood beside him through army days, lean years, and his ascent to fame. But fame, like wildfire, has a way of scorching everything that matters. That same year, during a Louisiana hayride tour, Johnny met June Carter, a magnetic performer with a haunting voice and a gaze that made the room feel heavier. Their connection sparked instantly, electric, intense, and dangerous. What began as chemistry on stage soon deepened behind the curtain. Johnny, already battling demons and the weight of fame, found comfort in June's calm and temptation in her presence. Rumors swirled, turbulent whispers grew quieter. Vivian, watching it all unfold, felt the shift. Johnny's offstage struggles only worsened. He couldn't stay sober. His physical and emotional distance grew. Vivian, weary from years of secrets and sleepless nights, finally filed for divorce in 1966. The woman who once held his hand while he chased dreams now stepped out of his life and the spotlight. But what came next surprised everyone. Johnny's bond with June didn't wane. It deepened. He proposed to her again and again, only to be turned down, until 1968, when he dropped to one knee before a live audience and asked her once more. This time, she said yes. Their marriage became legendary. Two icons, scarred and seasoned, choosing each other again and again. They stayed together until the very end, passing away just months apart in 2003. He broke a promise, he shattered a home, but somehow, Johnny Cash found a love that stitched his soul back together, one verse, one stage, one woman at a time. Ingrid Bergman, the love affair that brought down a star. In 1950, Ingrid Bergman was the embodiment of grace, the radiant face of Casablanca, a foreign enchantress who had won over America's heart. But one decision, one man, and one love affair would transform her from Hollywood's sweetheart into one of its most scandalized outcasts. Though still married to her husband, Swedish Dr. Peter Lindström, Ingrid traveled to Italy to film Stromboli with acclaimed director Roberto Rossellini. What began as a collaboration quickly evolved into something much more intimate. Their long working hours stretched deep into the night. Rumors began making their way from the volcanic island where they filmed back to Hollywood's polished corridors. Then, the truth broke like thunder. Ingrid was pregnant with Rossellini's child. The backlash was swift and brutal. Thousands of letters poured into studios, angry, betrayed fans now rejecting the woman they once idolized. And the condemnation didn't stop with the public. U.S. Senator Edwin C. Johnson took to the Senate floor, calling her a powerful influence for evil, and even proposing legislation to censor films based on the private lives of their stars. One affair nearly sparked morality laws for the entire industry. Hollywood, ever wary of controversy, dropped her like a bad investment. Her name vanished from marquees, job offers disappeared. In just a few short months, Ingrid Bergman transitioned from Oscar-winning legend to social outcast. But rather than retreat, she remained in Italy, married Roberto Rossellini, and welcomed their son into the world. Over time, they would have 3 children, one of whom Isabella Rossellini would rise to fame herself. The marriage, though intense and full of passion, was also rocky and short-lived. By 1957, it had unraveled. Eventually, the public tide turned once again. Hollywood, known for its fleeting memory and craving for comebacks, embraced Ingrid anew. In 1956, she earned her second Academy Award for Anastasia, though she wasn't there to accept it. Nevertheless, the applause rang true. The forgiveness wasn't easily given. Ingrid had been cast out for following her heart, but she never expressed regret for her choices. In the end, the very passion that once consumed her also led her back to greatness. Humphrey Bogart's affair shattered his marriage vows and sealed his legacy in 1944. On the sultry and tension-charged set of To Have and Have Not, Hollywood's most rugged leading man made a life-altering decision only that would alter not just his own destiny, but the lives of 2 women. At 44, Bogart was already a cinematic icon, renowned for portraying tough men with wounded souls. At home, he was married to actress Mayo Method, whose volatile temper had earned the couple the moniker the Battling Bogarts. Their relationship was stormy, marred by jealousy, explosive arguments, and long periods of silence. Still, Bogart had never walked away until Lauren Bacall entered the scene. She was only 19, poised, striking, with a smoky voice and eyes that could pierce armor. Their attraction was impossible to ignore. On set and behind the scenes, they whispered privately, laughed a little to long at each other's remarks, and disappeared when no one was watching. The crew noticed, so did the media, and so did Mayo. The scandal was irresistible to Hollywood. The brooding star, the fresh-faced newcomer, and the scorned wife. Rumors spread that director Howard Hawkswell had discovered Bacall was incensed, driven by a mix of wounded ego and jealousy. He cautioned Bogart that she would eventually break his heart. he warned Bacall that she was jeopardizing her career. Neither paid heed. By 1945, Bogart filed for divorce. The consequences were swift and deeply personal. Friends took sides. Male's drinking worsened. Bacall's reputation suffered. Studios whispered behind her back, branding her a homewrecker before she even turned 21. But Bogart stood firm. He Wednesday Bacall just weeks after finalizing his divorce, and against all expectations, their union endured through war, career triumphs, and private sorrows. They remained together until Bogart passed away in 1957. In a town known for fleeting romances, theirs was something enduring and rare. Yet the price was clear: a fractured marriage, a woman disgraced in public, and a young actress swept into scandal before she could find her footing. Bogart often portrayed men who had seen too much, loved too deeply, and trusted too late. In real life, his most significant role may have been the one he tried hardest to conceal behind closed doors. Cary Grant. Cary Grant's Wolf Gentleman, who revised the narrative and erased his own wife from the script. In 1957, he appeared on set perfectly tailored, effortlessly charming, the epitome of Hollywood elegance, but beneath that polished surface lay a betrayal, as cunning as the clapboard marking the scene's first take. At 53, Grant agreed to star in Houseboat, a romantic comedy centered on a widower and the spirited Italian woman who upends his life. The screenplay had been carefully crafted by his wife, Betsy Drake, a thoughtful actress and writer who hoped the film would rejuvenate both his career and their marriage. She had originally been slated to star alongside him. What unfolded next blindsided her and rewrote the story entirely. Enter Sophia Loren. At just 23, Loren radiated allure, sharp, sensuous, and already a European sensation. She and Grant had worked together the previous year on The Pride and the Passion, sparking rumors of an emerging romance. By the time filming began for Houseboat, whispers had turned into reality. Determined to pursue Loren, Grant orchestrated a calculated change. The script was reworked. Betsy was removed, and Sophia took her place. Betsy, who had poured her heart into the project, wasn't merely replaced, she was wiped out of it altogether. The affair between Grant and Loren unfolded, publicly undeniably passionate, and it was fated to end. In later interviews, Sophia admitted she felt torn, honored by Grant's interest, but already emotionally bound to producer Carlo Ponti, whom she would later marry. Grant's marriage to Betsy dissolved quietly. No dramatic headlines, no public declarations, just a quiet unraveling. His relationship with Sophia ended as well, but not without leaving behind the debris of a broken union, a discarded script, and a scandal neatly glossed over by studio polish. Years later, Sophia would describe Grant as one of the great loves of her life, but she never turned back. And Grant, ever the gentleman on screen, never fully acknowledged the consequences of rewriting a love story to serve his own desires. On camera, he was every woman's dream. Behind the scenes, Cary Grant ensured that he alone picked his lead-in, even if someone else had to be edited out. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth, screen goddess who couldn't find lasting love in real life. In 1946, Rita lit up the screen in Gable with her hypnotic hair flips and smoldering glasses. She personified desire. Audiences were mesmerized. Soldiers painted her image on bomber planes. She was christened the love goddess. Yet behind the cinematic fantasy, the woman the world adored was quietly unraveling under the pressure of perpetual longing. Born Margarita Cancino, Rita had been molded by men before she even understood herself. First by her father, who thrust her into dance at a young age, then by the film studios that dyed her hair red, raised her hairline via electrolysis, and taught her how to walk, talk, and smile like a living dream. Then came the husbands. Rita married 5 times, and each time the pattern repeated itself. The men worshipped her image, not her truth. Her most astonishing marriage came in 1949, when she Wednesday Prince Ali, grandson of the Aga Khan, and one of the most eligible aristocrats on the planet. Hollywood was stunned. For a moment, it seemed like a fairy tale, the Hollywood siren transformed into a real-life princess. But the dream dissolved fast. While expecting their daughter Yasmin, Rita learned that Ali Khan was still entertaining other women, even as she waited alone in lavish European residences and hotel rooms. The betrayal cut deeper than the tabloids could capture. Rita had sacrificed her career, homeland, a religion to be with Hymanley to find herself excluded from her own story. The marriage ended in divorce in 1953. Though she returned to Hollywood, something in her had shifted. She remained radiant, compelling, but an air of quiet sorrow began to follow her, both on screen and off. She once famously said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with me." It was more than a line, it was the silent grief of a woman who had spent her life being idolized, but never truly understood. By the 1970s, Rita's health began to deteriorate due to early onset Alzheimer's. Long before the public grasped the nature of the illness, the woman once celebrated by millions started to vanish from collective memory. While her films remained timeless, she had gifted the world with allure, charm, and fantasy, but in her own story, Rita Hayworth spent her life in search of a love that never quite found its way into the script. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger, betrayal that hid in plain sight, beneath his own roof. In 2011, the world discovered a secret that didn't belong to Schwarzenegger's past or distant career, but existed inside his very household. For over 10 years, Arnold had kept hidden a transgression so intimate, so close to home, it tore apart the carefully constructed image he had spent decades building. He was the ultimate action hero, former Mr. Olympia turned box office titan. Then came politics. The governor of California, he seemed to dominate every world he stepped into. Yet within the walls of his Brentwood estate, cracks had already formed. The truth emerged only after his tenure as governor ended. His Saturday down with Maria Shriver, his wife of 25 years, a Kennedy by birth and a journalist by profession, and confessed the